This program was made possible by Rock Creative Images, StorySource, Tennessee Performing Arts Center Management Corporation, the First Amendment Center, and by contributions to your PBS station by viewers like you. Thank you.
It was a vision that had captured the hearts and minds here in our state.
If they could do this in Washington, D.C., why can't we do it in Nashville, Tennessee?
You're going to spend $13,572,000 here in Nashville to please these affluent people.
12 million patrons later, 12,000 performances later, 1,500,000 children later. It's easy to forget how tough it was, what a sacrifice it was, what opposition there was to it.
Had it not been built, there would not be just a hole in the ground, there would be a hole in the hearts of the city.
For more than 30 years now, the Tennessee Performing Arts Center has brought the arts and learning together, transforming classroom lessons into memorable life lessons through theater, music, and dance. I'm Gene Policinski from the First Amendment Center, and I'm about to introduce you to the visionaries who made all of this possible. But first, it's important to note, TPAC is the current home to the Nashville Ballet, the Nashville Opera, the Tennessee Repertory Theater, a thriving Broadway series, and a popular concert series of events. Through this diverse programming, TPAC greets up to 500,000 audience members each year, averaging 500 performances, and contributes a $30 million economic impact to the city each year. TPAC was not always the heart of Tennessee's performing arts community. It was the brainchild of Nashville businesswoman Martha Ingram, who fought passionately during the 1970s to find the funding and a home for the performing arts in Tennessee. A reunion of these visionaries occurred just recently, and they were able to discuss the highs and lows of this process. The first was with Martha Ingram, former Governor Ned McWherter, and TPAC's president and CEO, Kathleen O'Brien. They discussed a shared dream that became a reality.
I'm John Seigenthaler, and we're here today to talk about the 30th anniversary of the founding of the Tennessee Performing Arts Center. What a great honor it is for me to be with all of you and reminisce a bit about the founding of this center. September 5th, 1980 was the dedication day. But I want to take you back, Martha, if I might, to 1972. My guess is that there were not but 2 people in Nashville in 1972 who ever believed that the dream of a performing arts center could come true, you and Vic Johnson. Tell us about that moment in which Vic says, I can't sell it to the city fathers.
I was invited along with some other wives of prominent men. There were 15, maybe 20 women that were invited to Aladdin for lunch, and he wanted to show us some slides of what he had underway at Metro Center. He went along telling us that there was going to be high-tech there and housing here and low-tech there. And he said, and down by the river, I was going to put in a performing arts center, but it needed funding, and I couldn't get any interest from the Chamber of Commerce or from any of the businessmen. And at the end of this presentation, he said, well, ladies, do you have any questions? And I was just back from the Kennedy Center in Washington, where I'd become a member of the advisory board. And I said, well, Vic, what are you doing with that property today that you'd set aside for a performing arts center? He said, well, it's still there. And I said, well, if you failed with the men, would you give the women a shot at it? And he practically jumped across the podium to the table. He said, well, of course. I said, well, you know, we've got some very influential women here, and let us have a go. And so we decided that we would, and there was one in particular who was interested, Annette Eskin, and she said, you know, I know the mayor, let's go see the mayor. So we went to see the mayor, and the mayor said, I have zero interest in that. I'm building access to interstates and sewer systems, and no interest here. So she said, you know, something has just occurred to me. There's going to be a bicentennial in 4 years. This was 1972 when we were talking. But in 4 years, the country's bicentennial is going to take place. I understand, said she, that there's going to be $1 million given to each of the states to do something to celebrate that that historic time. And she said, maybe we could get that money as a start. We decided that had to go through the state, so we found out who it was that was going to handle any bicentennial celebrations. And so we made an appointment and went there, and we got some interest, and then we went on to see the governor, who was Winfield Dunn. Winfield was very glad to see us, and I'd never met him before. He said, well, yes, I'd be interested in this, but how do you foresee it going forward? And we said, well, we think that the bricks and mortar money should come from the state, but we can find money, private money, for an endowment to run a performing arts center, just as they've done at the Kennedy Center in Washington. Winfield actually said, you know, Martha, if you want to be successful, you are going to need to make friends with the Speaker of the House and the Speaker of the Senate, because they're the Democrats and I'm a Republican. And if I put something like this in, it's just the way politics work, it's not likely to fly. Why don't you see if you can get to be friends with Ned McWherter and John Wilder? And it turned out to be one of the happiest moments of my life.
If you look back at that time and think about what this was going to entail, it's a major financial commitment on the part of the state. And Ned, let me just ask you, what are you thinking when you hear that Martha Ingram, patron of the arts, is going to come and talk to you about a performing arts center?
Martha and her late husband, Bronson, came and talked with me, and she taught me the value of knowing more about the arts and the performing arts particularly. Rural kids never have the benefit in school of growing up and having the advantage of going to a performing arts center. And she told me that this would be a place for the ladies and gentlemen of Nashville and the working men and women of this state, but more than anything, their children.
It's easy to forget how tough it was, what a sacrifice it was, what opposition there was to it, and it was very, very serious. Did you know at the outset that you were going to have such a steep legislative hill to climb?
Of course, I had no idea. Someone asked me, how did I deal with my fear of failure? I said, it never occurred to me we'd fail. But there were times along the way, we had to win. But I knew it was going to be difficult.
Senator Baird was out of Wilson County, out of Lebanon, and he stood on the floor and denounced it and did so with tongue-in-cheek. I remember said something about people of affluence. The only people who are for this are people of affluence, and they're all calling me up on the phone, and no farm workers are. I mean, he was bitter.
I was told it would be a good thing for me to call on one of our legislators who lived in a smaller town away from here, and so I got in the car and made an appointment, went to see him, and I won't call his name because it sounds like such a crazy story, but I said, and so, sir, this is what we would like to do, to have this wonderful facility that would have symphonies and ballet and opera and Broadway theaters, repertory theater. And he said, I just have to ask you something. He said, my wife tried to get me cultured, so she took me to Atlanta to see the ballet, and I looked at all those girls running around on their toes, and I kept thinking to myself, why don't they just hire taller girls in the first place? And I thought, oh dear, this is going to be difficult. Yeah. But, you know, the amazing thing to me is much of this was really brought about to get the legislator to go along with us from our women's committee that we founded, which ended up, I think we had 75 women from all towns, little towns, big towns, but they were all wives of prominent people. I mean, these women had just one job, and that was to get their legislator to a yes vote for this project. And they could, I said, I don't care how you do it, as long as it's legal. I want you to have tea with them, Coca-Colas, whatever it takes. But your job is to get your legislator to a yes. And so this is really, I mean, I think that probably did as much as anything else to help Bill Leach sew up these votes because, you know, as you say, it is then and now, there are a lot of rural representatives that really had zero interest in what we were doing.
There was a vision Governor Ray Blanton had. I need a parking garage. And that's what he wanted to do with it. And there was a time when the project was really on hold. This was a giant hole in the ground where we're sitting right now. And his vision was fill the hole in the ground with a parking garage. How'd you react to that?
You know, I was utterly speechless, and this was just as he had come into office, and I just was paying a courtesy call on him, and he said, I'm sorry to tell you, but I'm not going to let your project be built. I said, I beg your pardon? I thought I misheard. And he said, no, we need a parking garage under the state office building, much more than we need your performing arts center. That's the end of it. Fortunately, my husband had gone with me because I'd asked him to. This was a new person I'd not met. We came out of that meeting and I was stunned. And he said, you know, why don't we go see your friend, Ned McWherter? You and he seem to have developed a good relationship, and let's see what he has to say. Well, I have to tell you, it was the luckiest thing. Ned happened to be in. His secretary recognized me because I'd been in so many times to see him previously. So she said right away, Mr. Speaker, Martha Ingram's here to see you again. And Miss Ingram's here too. So we walked in, and I was still speechless, and Bronson told Ned what had happened. And Ned came over and he put his arm around my shoulder and he said, honey, just don't you worry, I can handle this.
John, you remember Ray Blanton well. I liked him very much. I supported him. But he was tough, and he was hell-bent on not building a performing arts center, if that's plain enough.
That's plain enough.
And I told him that I had the budget, and it was his budget, and I had to have that bill to go with that budget. And they had to go kind of side by side. That's the way you do a legislative program.
Could I translate this, Governor? I have your budget, Governor. And if you want your budget, I want my building.
I want to be sure we don't just build a parking lot. I want an office building and a performing arts center over there, and whatever's left, you can park around it.
And I never had another problem from the then governor again. I never spoke to him again because I didn't want to say what I might say to him. But at any event, that's why anybody who will talk about, you know, all this wonderful, wonderful thing, and I tell them every time, it's wonderful, but only because then Speaker McWherter stood by us and it happened. If he had not stood by us, this would have been just one of those good ideas that went away.
I just think that I convinced the legislators that we were going to have a vision that would move this community forward in Nashville. It was our state capital, and we were going to spread this effort across the state of Tennessee. And we have in West Tennessee, and we have in other areas of Tennessee. Look at Murfreesboro. What you go to MTSU's campus now. Look, you go to Knoxville and see what they've got over there, and go on to East Tennessee State up there, and they've got facilities similar to this. So it's a vision that you know that I can drive across the state and see it became a reality, and it started right here.
I think back over these 30 years. How this place has enriched the life of this community. I remember sitting up there somewhere the night Princess Grace was here.
Yes.
Who ever thought Princess Grace of Monaco would come into Nashville for a reading? I won't go down the litany of visiting artists who have meant so much to the life of the arts nationally, internationally. And they've been right here in this place largely because of what the two of you did. And such great moments have enriched the life of Nashville because the center is here.
We have got something that's a remarkable treasure, and it really all was possible because of this. It became, the rest of the facility developed so well, we now have built a separate home for the orchestra.
Indeed,
because it was so much competition. But the competition was with things that we never even had before. An opera, it came into being after the TPAC was open. We had no ballet here, and there was no professional theater until here. In fact, we're proving at Vanderbilt that the youngsters exposed to the arts do better in school.
What the arts do is allow you to reflect, learn how to think critically, because what you need to do is come up with creative solutions all through your life. And so, although we're not teaching you how to play an instrument, we're not teaching you a particular art form, how to be an actor, we are using aesthetic education to develop children's growth and experiences in education to be better students. And I think it's meant a tremendous amount. That's what gives me the greatest pleasure in my job. I love our Broadway series, I love all the different things we do, but it's when you reach the children and you know you've made an impact in their lives, it truly does matter. We've got parents who are bringing their children because these parents are part of came when they were children, when they were school children in Tennessee, and they remember what the Tennessee Performing Arts Center and its programs meant to them, and now they want to bring their children. It's going to continue the tradition that was really created when TPAC was created.
And we made substantial grants from state government to Chattanooga to reform and construct their theater down there, the old theater. We did the same thing in Knoxville. Beautiful old facility, and reformed and reconstructed. Same thing in Bristol, Tennessee. The same thing in Memphis. Lamar, in fact, had the Beale Street project that included the theater in Memphis. So this has really spread across our communities all across Tennessee.
Overall, it seems to me that the three of you together have given us a vision of the future that 38 years ago with you and Vic Johnson never could have been envisioned. So I want to say to all three of you how deeply grateful I am for
Thank you for endorsing it.
Contributions.
Martha Ingram and Governor Ned McWherter set the stage for TPAC's genesis, but another governor also played a part in that drama, the one that ensued in the state legislature over Tennessee's first performing arts center. Here, Governor Winfield Dunn and Senator Douglas Henry, who was on the legislature's finance committee at the time, discussed their roles in making sure that the TPAC story had a happy ending.
What was it about the concept, the idea, that made you willing to put your signature on the bill?
Well, John, I think as much as any one factor, it was a vision. It was a vision that had captured the hearts and minds of some wonderful people here in our state. And that vision burned bright. Although you can't completely visualize at a moment in time what's going to be the future, they had some pretty firm ideas about what they wanted to do to bring an appreciation of the arts to more people in our great state.
Now you're talking about individual, private citizens who had this vision.
Absolutely. A task force, a human task force walked into my office. And the task force consisted of three lovely Nashville ladies. Among them, Martha Ingram, Mrs. Bronson Ingram, Ann Wilson, Mrs. David K. Wilson, and the third one, Annette Eskin. They were so filled with enthusiasm, and they had such a bright light in their eyes that I knew these women had a real task they wanted to achieve. They persuaded me that it made all kind of sense and that they were willing to get out and raise the necessary private capital to support the concept in a partnership with the state. If the state would build it, they'd maintain it and look after it. And it's such a thrill to see what has happened.
Thinking back on it, Senator Henry, let me just ask you about your role. Here you are, a Nashvillian, You and I both can remember Senator Bill Baird of Lebanon, hostile to this idea.
He was.
And he's talking about this idea, this cockeyed idea these affluent people have. And he said they're good people, but he made affluence sound like a dirty word. How did you overcome that?
Bill Baird was an excellent lawyer, as you remember. He's a courtroom man. So was Bill Peeler. And here those two fellows go at it, each so well prepared, each so able. I just had to be on the finance committee that time. I wasn't chairman, I remember. So I think I moved the bill in finance committee. But at any rate, I didn't do the heavy lifting. Bill Peeler did that.
Back in those days, let me just remind you, the state of Tennessee did not have a fully funded kindergarten program statewide for its children. We had a terrible prison system. We had a series of decrepit, out of date, out of compliance mental health institutions. We had an interstate system that had bogged down for a lack of funding. The state of Tennessee had many, many problems, many of which were clearly identified by such men as Senator Baird. And knowing all that, as they clearly knew it, being political people, and yet not having quite caught that vision that I spoke of, that Martha and her friends were so filled with, I can truly appreciate the difficulty of changing the thoughts and minds of some of these fine legislators, because they saw great need out there that had nothing to do with performing arts. So it was a tough sell, and I look back and I appreciate men like Bill Peeler, Douglas Henry, and many others who fought the battle. I want to make a comment about Ned McWherter, who at the time I was governor happened to be Speaker of the House. He had strong leadership qualities, obviously, and he used them extraordinarily well and became, in the process, a favorite of Martha Ingram, which he deserved to be, because he did do influential lobbying among his fellow legislators for the project, and he did it beautifully.
TPAC education, what's that?
It's many things, and it's grown. We basically have 4 different arms of education, and we do consider education to be lifelong. So we approach education as lifelong learning, but it starts getting into the school systems. I know that I enjoyed performing arts because of the educational opportunities I had and what my parents gave to me. So we have a program called Humanities Outreach in Tennessee. It starts with kindergarten and goes through 12th grade. And we create lesson plans and guidebooks to help teachers have free teaching materials, so that's not a burden on the state. And we go into the classrooms and look at what grade levels are studying what and create appropriate programs for them at that level. For instance, West Side Story. They'll learn about assimilation. They'll learn about conflict resolution. And then they'll also understand what was going on in the world at that time. So it's from that perspective that we approach education. Then they'll come to the performance and learn how to be a member of a live audience. And with television and computers, being the member of a live audience is a very different thing. And so then they see a professional production of something, and they pay very little for it. Then they take those experiences, go back into the classroom, and continue the conversation.
Let's say Winfield Dunn, Ned McWherter, Martha Ingram had not been able to get it done.
Had it not been built, there'd be a terrible void here. There would not be just a hole in the ground. There would be a hole, I think, in the hearts of the city.
That's very moving.
Oh, that's beautifully said. You know, I can look back to those occasions when I came down to the Performing Arts Center to sit in a regular seat with everybody else and enjoy some exquisite performance. And for instance, the Phantom of the Opera.
You like that one?
Unbelievable. But you could look around that audience and you saw many people beautifully coiffured, elegantly dressed, but you also saw a lot of folks that could have been sitting out at the ballpark in the bleachers. They were just folks, the people that are the heart and soul of Tennessee. And they were in there drinking it up. And then I think about, what is it, 1.5 million children
That's right.
have come through and I see those school buses parked, and I think, oh boy, they're in there getting the time of their lives. And of course, all those experiences have gone into keeping that hole in our heart from existing. And it's just almost defies my imagination to think what Tennessee might be like without the Performing Arts Center.
Thank you all for joining us for this conversation, looking back on the founding and 30-year history of the Tennessee Performing Arts Center. It has been a great history. It's a building with a past and a present and a great future. We hope that you will be part of that future, and we thank you for joining us for this exciting conversation.
This program was made possible by Rock Creative Images, StorySource, Tennessee Performing Arts Center Management Corporation, the First Amendment Center, and by contributions to your PBS station by viewers like you. Thank you.
Congratulations to the Tennessee Performing Arts Center on 30 years of great performances, of great art and art education, and of being a vital part of the economic development of our Middle Tennessee communities. Happy anniversary, TPAC, and I wish you many more to come.
Happy anniversary, TPAC!
Happy anniversary, TPAC. We're so excited about your 30th and look forward to 30 more years.